Fast forward by Robert P. Fitton. The Grand Hall, set under a 3-kilometer-wide dome, dwarfed anything in the galaxy. The exalted galactic ruler, leader of half of the galaxy's human beings, gazed over the adulterating throng as his guards lifted his golden throne onto the hand-carved orca wood pedestal. He reached for his remole and slowly lowered his thumb onto the well-worn button. All motion within the room ceased, and he stood, raising his arms to the stars. "Fools! They will think I have vanished!" He sprang from the throne onto the stage and peered at his reflection in the template mirrors. His graying hair reminded him that 15 years had passed since he had left the college. He merged his rotund body through the template mirror and into the banquet hall, but stopped to view the food spread over the room-length table and the motionless crowd in the room. Frozen steam molecules were suspended over the food that generated no heat. He stood at the table center and removed the remole and debated whether to join the festivities. Bored, he released everything as if he were simply taking a movie off pause. The room flew into motion. "Enough!" They dropped in praise when they saw him appear. His guards, clad in red and gold satin, hurried to his side. "The feast has been prepared for my leader." "And the woman?" The guard clapped his hands, and several women clad in colorful sheer garments danced into the room. The exalted leader smashed his fists on the table. Like the excess food, these women were not enough to satisfy him. He prepared to reach for the remole. "Why must we be bored?" The guard fell to his knees. "I am sorry, my leader." "And why were there empty sections in the hall this evening?" "My leader, some colony people have taken to the streets, angry that you have withheld their spring food and clothing allowances. Many of them—" "Do not bother me with triviality. Get rid of them." "Yes, my leader." "Enough. I grow bored with this." He removed the remole and stopped everything again. Setting the remole in reverse would bring him through time and back to the college. He pushed his thumb onto the wider blue button, and the acceleration commenced. People buzzing about the room quickly blurred as he walked back into the grand hall. His entire day soon stretched like colored paint dripping onto a white spinning wheel, eventually dimming and darkening as the remole's red digits reversed and zoomed back to 0. He stopped, paused, and took a position in the corridor outside his old 6th-floor office at Craigton Hall. He saw himself as a younger man, hair deep brown and body slim behind his desk. "Steve Wilson speaking." "Yes, Dean Astor. No intrusion at all. You've made a decision? About the new department chairman, yes." "What?" "Dr. Milcoski." "Well, I wish him the best." Steve hung up and threw down the phone. He sprang from the chair and kicked it. The exalted ruler nodded. "You had every right to be upset, Steve." Steve banged the oak filing cabinet. "He's an old man, pompous and egotistical old man. All my work gone because of Milcoski." The exalted ruler shook his head and pushed the remole, and moved ahead several years to a faculty party at Dean Astor's home. Steve's appearance had not changed, and he walked, drink in hand, toward the silver-haired Milcoski and several of his colleagues. "Ah, Professor Wilson, how nice of you to join our little group. By the way, does everyone know Steve Wilson was the youngest graduate student at Stanford?" Steve stood rigid. "I'm not here to recap my career, Dr. Milcoski, nor to play showman to the faculty." Milcoski gazed down briefly and smiled at his friends. "If you will please excuse us." He led Steve into the hallway. "Steve, if you will forgive me, I believe you've consumed a little too much—" "Liquor doesn't affect me, Walter." "Something has your dander up tonight. What is it?" Steve set the drink on the hall table and pointed at Milcoski. "You never deserved the department chairmanship, and you know it." "Oh, so that's it. The usual. I should have guessed. Envy does not become you, Steve. Now, if you will pardon me—" "I want the chairmanship, Walter. You've had it long enough. You certainly are in a position to retire if you wanted to. Milcoski started back into the front room. All work in a diminished capacity. Milcoski turned. And you think you're the one to take my place, do you? I won't discuss it any further. Steve followed him into the main room. I work hard. I worked hard long before you came on the scene, and I've worked hard since. All those years playing second fiddle to the great Walter Milcoski. You are drunk, and you have a limited understanding of things. I enjoy people, Steve. That's why you are envious of me in my position. Envious of you driving around a run-down Volkswagen and living in an apartment over the stationer's store? That is enough. It's the power you crave. The guest stared at Steve as he followed Milcoski out of the hall. That's it. It's the power. Milcoski wrapped his red scarf around his neck and donned his leather coat over his shoulders. You have no conception of what power truly is. Milcoski returned to the front room, bade farewell to Dean Astor, and diverted from Steve as he left. Steve ran to the sidelight and watched him negotiate the slippery front walk. He hurried to the closet and rummaged through the hangers for his own coat. As he fumbled with his coat, the dean shook his hand and wasted precious time blabbing about an upcoming faculty meeting. When Steve finally entered the cold air, Milcoski had backed his little red Volkswagen down the drive. He shifted and the smoky exhaust trailed down the snow-covered street. Killing Milcoski would be easy. Steve stepped through the chilly February air and thought about his plan. He would kill Milcoski by loosening the wood balustrade on the professor's third-floor balcony. And once he had the doctor on the porch, he would send Milcoski careening into the parking lot below. He laughed at the cleverness of his plan as he trudged down the snow-dusted Main Street sidewalk. A few minutes later, he passed Milcoski's car under the rear lot's street lamp, and he gazed up at the thin layer of snow on the third-floor balcony. Like a burglar, he moved swiftly up the aging wood staircase. At the kitchen door, he looked inside. Milcoski was settled in his recliner and picked up the TV's remote control, but abruptly set it back on the table. He checked his empty tobacco pouch, stood, and then grasped the remote in both hands. As Steve rubbed the fog off the window glass, Milcoski pushed the remote and vanished. Stunned, Steve checked again, not believing he had seen Milcoski disappear. He kicked the back door and ran into the living room. A room search confirmed that the doctor was gone. The front door chain lay securely in place. Steve stood in the center of the room as the glass clock on the mahogany piece slowly clicked out the seconds. You? He turned. Milcoski stood in front of the chair, the remote control still in his hand. Tiny colored lights blinked and red digits were displayed on an upper screen. You disappeared. I did? Are you telling me you can move from place to place at will? Milcoski held the device securely in his hand and grinned. Why, of course. I went down to Higgins' tobacco shop on Main Street, procured my tobacco, put in the appropriate currency in the register, and no one is the wiser. Except you, Steve. How is this possible? I am from your future, a once gifted child obsessed with time. He held the device in the air. This is absolute power. I lived on the Alphid colony. As a youth, I watched discs of the ancestral planet. It took years to perfect this. I can move forward or backward in time. I can stop time. Time to be rejuvenated. Rejuvenated? A complete genetic overhaul. Incredible. Steve deemed getting the device more important than killing Milcoski. You are a very clever man, but why waste your time here? I am a contented man. Hold my robe, Steve. The power will flow between us. I will not need to make any adjustment. Steve looked into Milcoski's eyes and slowly gripped his blue smoking jacket. Nothing changed. He watched the glass clock when Milcoski pushed the lower right button. The clock pendulum stopped in mid-stroke, and he turned to the doctor. What happened? We have paused the world around us. Milcoski led him into the kitchen and toward the broken door, but no cold air filtered inside. The snow on the railing outside had no temperature as they descended the staircase. The flakes were rigid in the dark air. On Main Street, a car locked in time shone its headlights across the lonely street. "This can't be real," said Steve. "As real as anything else. Don't you realize what you could do with this?" They moved onto the snow-banked sidewalk. Milcoski stopped. "I have seen the pain of the human condition. I earnestly try to change things, but I do not have the wisdom to alleviate pain." "We can share the device." Milcoski laughed and shook his head. "You and me? You would use the control for personal gain. I know you all too well, Steve." "What are you going to do with me?" "I haven't decided yet." They continued up the sidewalk past a young couple stuck in mid-stride. Their eyes were like glass crystals in a showcase, and their faces contorted in the midst of conversation. Even the dark hands of the glowing white clock face never moved past 11 minutes past 11 o'clock. "I am going to release the stop time." Steve nodded. The couple, now behind them, walked hand in hand down the Main Street sidewalk and were engaged in a light conversation, and the car, gridlocked in time a few seconds before, kicked up the slush along the asphalt. The cold bit his hands and ears. "Now what?" "We are going to take a little trip. Now hold on." Milcoski pushed the button above, and the clock tower hands spun madly as night flipped to day, flickering so only a dim twilight covered the town. The buildings remained firm. Trees disappeared, others grew in seconds and then disintegrated. New buildings appeared, some vanished. "The stationer's building will come down in 2116. Historic groups will try to save it. Keep your eye on it as we pass, Steve." Like a blip on the radar screen, the 3-story building popped out of existence, replaced by a highly reflective green cylinder. New geometric shapes of varying colors formed across the street. Other buildings vanished, even the police station, but the clock tower remained. A bright flash momentarily blinded Steve. When he opened his eyes, none of the buildings stood. A warming breeze brushed his face as they crossed into a small field surrounded by a dense forest. Between the trees and the shadows, the clock tower survived. What happened? "Welcome to 3110 AD. You will find it very habitable here, Steve. In fact, you may become quite happy." "No, trust me with your secret, Walter." "Dean Astor told me the same thing." "Astor? No, he just left his party." "No, 5 years after the party, Astor retired. He, like you, found out my secret. Other people you don't know, but whom you will know, are here also." "Milcoski's private graveyard. You have no right to control people like this." "And you have no right to threaten me." Steve grit his teeth and surveyed the fauna. He had no intention of staying here and clutched Milcoski's smoking jacket. It was imperative that he overpower the doctor. He continued asking questions about the future, tapping Milcoski's ego and letting him pontificate about his abilities and prowess in constructing the device. "Dr. Milcoski! Dr. Milcoski!" Dean Astor, clad in a bright orange jumpsuit, ran with a few other people toward the field. Milcoski's thumb moved toward the fast-forward button, but Steve yanked it, backhanded Milcoski's face, and thrust his knee into the doctor's stomach. He lunged for the control, wrestled it easy from Milcoski's hands, and pushed the pause button. Milcoski, his mouth half open in mid-sentence, assumed a figurine appearance in the bright sunlight. Astor and the others were frozen on the clearing's edge. Steve laughed and grasped the remote control tightly as he backed away. Once he distanced himself, he released the time stop. Milcoski called from across the clearing. "A race against time, Steve, and you won." "Take a good look around you, Walter. Get used to 3110 AD. You, sir, are a victim of your own design." Steve pushed the fast-forward button and sped away through time. The exalted galactic ruler again prepared to address his people. Killing the 5,000 had provided a splendid example of obedience, and the packed hall awaited his return. He faced his guards. "I will go among them this evening. Let them touch their leader." He held the removal inside his garment and walked into the hall. A collective cheer rose from the gathering as he slowly raised his arms toward the sky dome. Encircled by his guards, he ambled across the platform and down the steps. A million hands and enlivened figures reached for him. They called his name, and he nodded as he passed. They loved him as well as they should. As their provider, his leadership had allowed them sustenance of life. He shuffled forward, his elbows sideswiping the guards ahead as they stopped. "Move, I say!" The guards and the surrounding mass froze. He immediately reached for the remote and pushed the buttons, but nothing happened. "What is this?" "It is justice." He turned but saw no one. "Who said that?" "You don't look well, Steve. A bit heavy, and oh, so old. Where are you? Does it matter?" He moved around the guards and checked the crowd as he rushed back to the platform. Shielding his eyes, he gazed across their solid faces. "Where are you?" Youthful and exuberant, Milcoski, wearing a beige corduroy jacket and light chinos, emerged from behind the guards. He held another remote in his hands. "You really should have taken better care of yourself, Steve." "How did you get here?" "Actually, I just left the auditorium where I taught your class on subatomic particles. They miss your description of quarks and gluons." Steve pushed the buttons on his own remote. "What have you done to my control?" "Your control? Is that all you have to say for yourself? The man who complained that I should help the human condition? Now I stand before the altruistic leader of the galaxy. How generous, Steve. How generous." Steve started forward but stopped near the stairs. He looked down at Milcoski. "Man does not care about generosity." "Oh, shut up, Steve. I could have you killed." "I don't think so." "You will experience your own magnificence firsthand," said Milcoski. "I don't understand." "You will. I have to go now. I have my own classes to teach." With a subtle smile, Milcoski raised his brows and pushed a button on his own remote and disappeared. Steve lunged down the stairs, slipping but quickly stood. "Milcoski!" He wove around the immobilized guards and hurried down the main aisle and frantically pushed the remote buttons. Cursing the doctor, he searched the hall aisle by aisle and finally stumbled back on stage. For the longest time he sat on the stairs and sobbed into his open hands. He mumbled ineffectually as the emotion churned. Weakened, he stood and faced his unmoving subjects. Again he tried the remote, but when it did not function, he hurled it high into the darkness. "I will let you people share my power. I will humble myself, walk among you. Give me the chance. I will prove it. I've learned I was wrong to hold so much power." Wiping the eyes, he wandered down the stairs and retrieved the remote. He punched the buttons as he ascended to his gold throne. With the remote set in the chair arm, the exalted galactic ruler buried his head in his hands. Like opening a door into a sports stadium, wild cheering instantly shook the hall. He raised his head. The guards moved and held back his subjects. A gradual smile filled his place. He stood and raised his hands to the sky dome. The room quieted as they awaited his words. I am the exalted ruler. Worship me. Worship me.